I think we have bedbugs. In this day and age, that phrase is seemingly becoming all too familiar. And it's one I definitely did not want to pass through my lips anytime soon, if ever. My name is Mike, and I live with my wife and 3 boys in a small Midwestern town. There's been talk lately around about recent bedbug sightings, and to tell you the truth, it unnerves me completely. I thought we were safe, but that was me probably being a bit naive. That was before my wife and I started seeing the signs in our home. The first sign was when we began seeing small bloodstains on our bed sheets and pillows. Neither my wife or I have issues with nosebleeds, so I could see no other plausible explanation for this. Soon after, we would both wake up in the middle with itchy, red bumps that looked like mosquito bites. And let me tell you, they itched like hell. Sometimes I could barely stand it. Luckily, it seemed that the bugs were confined to our bedroom and hadn't yet spread to our kids' bedrooms. Now, how the bugs came to be in our house was a bit of a mystery. Both my wife and I work in town. I work at a local do-it-yourself type of general store. It has just about a little of everything from tools to paint supplies. My wife works as an executive assistant in an office building. I did my own research soon after we suspected we had bedbugs, and it seems that they can be found just about anywhere nowadays. My guess was that some of the bugs hitchhiked a ride one day when my wife left for the day to come home. The days passed, with us trying everything we could to try and take care of them ourselves. Store-bought insecticides and traps weren't working, and we were quickly losing much-needed sleep. Just the thought of some unseen tiny creature seeping out of the darkness as we drifted off to sleep to drink some of my blood like a vampire scared me more than any man-sized monster. Sometimes I thought as I would lay there in bed, just beginning to drift off to sleep, that I could feel them crawling on my skin. The only good thing that we had going for us at that time was the fact that the bedbugs still remained confined only to our bedroom. Our 3 boys displayed no signs of being exposed to the bugs. This seemed unusual to me, based on what I had read about them online, trying to educate myself. None of my coworkers seemed to be complaining about them, and my wife said the same thing. Not that I wanted to pry into people's lives. I'm sure it's a subject nobody wants out in the open. Everything changed last night, though. My wife had gone to bed early. Somehow she was still able to sleep in our bedroom despite our unwanted house guests. I was still up in my chair downstairs, looking online for an exterminator. It was the only option we seemingly had left, but the prices for a complete fumigation was not sitting well with me or our bank account. After a while, my eyelids started to feel heavy, so I decided to retire for the night. I made my way upstairs and stepped into the doorway of the master bedroom. Now, it wasn't unusual to find our 4-year-old in our bed by the time I came up. He had a sensory thing where he liked to lay next to my wife and hold her hair as he fell asleep. I guess it was about comfort for him. I would then gently release his grasp and carry him into his bed for the night. So just as I expected, when I walked into the room, I could just make out the small shape of his body next to my wife. But as I got closer, I could tell something was different this time. Instead of laying next to my wife's back as he usually did, I saw that he was sitting up on his knees, almost leaning over my wife's head. I took my phone out of my pants pocket and used the screen to illuminate where he was sitting so I could get a better look. What I saw horrified me. As the light from my phone shined onto my son, he quickly lifted his head to look at me. I swear I saw something that looked like a thin straw retract back into his mouth, and he then hissed at me, like when a wild animal feels threatened when it gets cornered. It was then I noticed how the small amount of light from my phone's screen reflected off of his eyes. His inhuman eyes. Before I could even react to this sight, he pounced off the bed like a frog and came straight at me. He hit me square in the chest, knocking me to the floor. I felt like I'd been hit by a basketball at high speed, and I clutched at my chest as I attempted to catch my breath. Now, for whatever reason I may never know, my son, or the thing that was imitating my son, didn't attack me. It didn't go back to my wife as she laid there in her weakened state. As I was still on our bedroom floor, I watched as it quickly ran and jumped out of one of the windows in our room. Our bedroom was on the second floor of the house. I got to my feet, mustering what strength I could at the moment. I watched out the broken window as it ran through my front yard and down the darkened street. As it ran, I witnessed as it quickly grew from the size of a young child to the size and shape of a fully grown man. Having forgotten about my wife for a moment, I heard her moan, which quickly brought me back to my current reality. I checked her neck. She had several small bite marks that bled just a little. I also ran into my kids' rooms, and thankfully, they were all unharmed. Even my 4-year-old was in his bed, sound asleep. He'd been there the whole time. I called the paramedics and police soon afterwards. Other than suffering from shock, both my wife and I were okay for the most part. I told the police what happened, told them what I had seen, including the thing's transformation as it fled. The 2 officers exchanged glances and told me they would file a report. They stated they would keep an eye out for the suspect, but I couldn't even begin to describe what it looked like. So, as you might imagine, we didn't have any more problems with bedbugs after this happened. In fact, we even had an exterminator come in and look the house over. He saw no bugs, and not even any signs of having them at all. Life has pretty much returned to normal. The other night I was doing some extended research on bedbugs. After all, I don't want to get them for real if we can avoid it. Apparently, parasitic insects have a body part called a proboscis that enables them to pierce the skin of unsuspecting victims to get their blood meal. To someone looking in the dark, it might appear to be a thin straw. I thought we had bedbugs. I just wish it had been.